Good evening and welcome to the Commissioners meeting tonight. If you will join me for a moment of silent prayer, and then we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're moving on to public comments. We did have one email comment sent in. And it was distributed to all the commissioners. If you didn't get it, be sure to let Carla know. And there's no one signed up this time. Okay, we'll move on to recognitions. Anyone have any recognitions? All right, we'll move on to Mr. Miller. You want to talk about that budget amendment?
Mr. Chairman, if you go ahead and I believe there's an amendment to the agenda that needs to be made. If that amendment to the agenda can be made, or if there's a closed session amendment that needs to be made. So if you can do that, approve the agenda. Then before we go into the consent agenda, I have a brief slideshow presentation about the project ordinance and the budget ordinance amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we go into closed session and add it to the agenda at the end.
Commissioners, that closed session is 143.318. .11.A.5 to establish or instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or the amount of compensation and other material terms of an employment contract or proposed employment contract.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor by roll call voting, Mr. Dickerson?
Aye.
Mr. Howell? Aye. Mr. Jeffries? Aye. Mr. Owen? Aye. Mr. Odestrike? Aye. Mr. Massengill?
Aye.
Mr. Bay? Aye. Motion carries. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add some additional items to item 7, discussion items.
Okay.
I'll just say over there, we'll get to that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, he made a motion for the consent agenda. I think the county manager has a brief presentation for us on that.
I do.
Yeah.
So are you ready?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Commissioners, I just wanted to briefly go over the project ordinance amendment and the budget ordinance amendment. We've had some training from the UNC School of Government, specifically the Deputy County Manager. It took about 8.5 hours of training, specifically focused on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, especially the standard allowance that's allowed through ARPCSLFRF monies. So go to the next slide. So there's basically 4 categories in which you can use your ARP dollars. Those are to address the COVID public health, and negative economic impacts, replace lost revenue, premium pay, and necessary infrastructure investments. The school of government put on a special class to basically say, if your local government is receiving between $7 and $10 million in ARP funding, you may expend your total allocation in the revenue replacement category. That category allows expenditures for almost any purpose authorized by state law. Next. So, next. Go back. Go forward. Yeah. So, what if you want to fund something from another category? Well, you can. You can expend those funds using those categories. But what the school of government says is that to address the COVID public health and negative economic impacts and necessary infrastructure investments, that both of those can be dealt with by taking the standard allowance and using those expenditures because they're already approved purposes that are authorized by state law. So there's no need to go, the school of government says there's no need to really expend funds in those categories. Their recommendation is to do everything you can do under lost revenue, except for premium pay. This slide says taking the standard allowance does not prevent you from funding projects in other categories, but you generally can fund anything as revenue replacement that you can fund in other categories with fewer limitations and reporting requirements, except premium pay. And the board will remember we did premium pay. We have to report premium pay in the premium pay category. So how does this look for casual? So this is kind of how it looks for casual. We've got the bucket of ARPA dollars coming in, which is $4,390,562. We use premium pay, so we'll leave premium pay coming out of that ARPA bucket, right? ARPA bucket. We will report the premium pay as ARPA dollars. The revenue replacement of $4,060,562, we're going to claim revenue replacement for. Out of that, we're going to report broadband internet of $600,000 because the board has agreed $250,000 for the great grant. And there will likely be a CAB program following the great grant, which there'll be a 35% match. So we've added $350,000 for that. And if the board chooses not to do that at some point in time, we don't have to. We can amend the reporting that we have. So, and then we're using $3,046,562 as we're reporting those as salaries. And that's specifically from EMS and the Sheriff's Department. That'll be over a 2 or 2.5 year period. And we'll report all of the salaries paid by our Sheriff's Department and EMS Department as ARPA eligible dollars through revenue replacement. So that money from the ARPA bucket flows in and goes straight into the general fund at that point in time. Then you're able to fund the fire department, EMS, sheriff department radios out of the general fund. We're able to fund the nonprofits, the janitorial services, the health department, the EMS ambulance, the salaries, and broadband out of the general fund, rather than funding those directly out of the ARPA bucket. So this is the recommended approach by the UNC School of Government. It provides the cleanest accounting approach, and it's highly recommended for all counties and municipalities which receive less than $10 million in ARPA funds. So the next slide, Ashley. So this is the final slide from the UNC School of Government slide deck. And basically what it says is the key takeaways from the the School of Government slide deck had 44 slides in it. I've kind of condensed that down to 4 slides. But it basically said the key takeaways from the presentation. If you're between 0 and 10 million, take the standard allowance. Spend all of your ARP funds in revenue replacement category, unless you're doing premium pay. If you're doing the premium pay, expend that amount in the premium pay category and the rest in the revenue replacement category. That's what we have contained in your project ordinance amendment for your ARPA dollars and in your budget amendment. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this.
Questions?
Mr. Manager, one question I had is in this paper that I got, it says that you can continue to reimburse the funds for the rest of this year or technically through 2026. Is that your plan?
No, the plan is, what the recommendation from the School of Government is that all of these revenue replacement dollars be fully spent by December of 2024. And the reason they're saying that is because they believe that there's a chance the federal government might look at these funds and say, hey, well, if you're not using them and you don't have a plan, you probably don't need them, we're just going to call them back. So we believe by December of 2024, the salaries in the EMS department and the sheriff's department will have total at least the amount needed to expend these funds, along with the broadband.
All right, and then the last question I have is it goes into the general fund.
That's correct.
And this, it goes into the general fund, and because they're no longer ARPA funds, none of the grant award terms, prohibitions, or UG requirements apply. But we still got to spend it for what they say we spend it for.
We got to spend it for what we say we spend it for.
Okay.
What we report, we would spend it.
But we have to report what we spend it for.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I will say it doesn't, just a point of clarification, it doesn't all flow into that bucket at one time. So if we spend $141,000 a month in EMS and Sheriff's Department salaries, that payroll is ran. That payroll is ran, employees are paid, then a transfer is made from the ARPA bucket into the general fund for $141,000. So it isn't a one-time flush of cash. It is expended, correct? It is expended as payroll is done, as we pay those things out, then we reimburse for the payroll that was just run.
Any more questions?
Yes, I'd like to understand that we're getting $4 million. I was thinking we only had 2 million coming.
Well, we had a total of $4,390,562, I believe. That was the total. The first tranche we received was 2 million, was basically half of that, 2,190,000 or something like that. Then we get the second tranche. We should have that in June or July this year.
Got it. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll do roll call voting. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Dickinson?
Aye.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Owens? Mr. Ostrike? Mr. Messenger? Aye. Motion carries. Discussion items, tax appeal from Mr. Thomas Wright.
Okay. So Commissioners, before we get started, I just want to make one statement. At the last meeting, I was sworn in at the Board of ENR. I acknowledge that I'm still sworn in, I'm still under oath. So I just want you to know that same oath still applies when I'm going over what I talked to you about today. So as I stated at our last meeting, Commissioners, I wanted to research this more than I already had. I wanted to go to Mr. Wright's residence and see what Mr. Wright was talking about physically. So Renee Strader and I went to Mr. Wright's home on Tuesday, May 10th, and I physically compared what has been built over the last 6 years to what is actually on the property. So for parcel ID 0026, when I compared the last 6 years for each mobile home and each home site, I found no discrepancies. There are a total of 5 home sites, 4 with utilities and 1 without. There are 5 mobile homes, 3 owned by Mr. Wright, 1 by the heirs of Bessie Goodman, on which Mr. Wright pays taxes, and 1 is owned by Humpbo. Mr. Wright is billed for 2 of these mobile homes, with the remaining mobile home having no value, no tax value. There have been adjustments made and refunds issued, but currently each year reflects what is actually located on the property. For parcel ID 0027, there is 1 home site and 1 single family home, and that is what has been billed from 2016 to 2021. I can go into parcel ID numbers and really get into the weeds if necessary, but what I want the board to know is that I've researched Mr. Wright's assessments and property cards and can find no reason for the board to consider a refund at this time. Additionally, the Board of ENR convenes for taxpayers to appeal current year tax values. That's the reason you're here, to listen to appeals on current year tax values. As of today, I'm not really aware of that Mr. Wright is appealing a current year tax value. This board is authorized by state statute if you find a current year tax value is wrong or an assessment is wrong, you can make adjustments for the current year plus 5 years in arrears. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's why I went back to 2016. I went back to the years this board could legally make adjustments to, and I can't find, in those years, I can't find any refunds that would be owed to Mr. Wright. I reviewed property taxes for Mr. Wright. I reviewed property taxes for Essie Goodman to make sure there was no double taxing or double listing. I reviewed real property for Mr. Wright. And honestly, I just can't find it. I'm happy to answer any questions the board or Mr. Wright has.
Questions?
I have one question. Going back from 2004 to 2016, where I think I heard you said that Mr. Wright had a mobile home on his site that was not on the site that he did get paid for. So I'll explain that to me because I'm not sure.
So so you have this mobile home that S.E. Goodman owned. Okay, so number one, it's not Mr. Wright's mobile home, it's S.E. Goodwin's mobile home. It was listed on a different parcel ID than it should have been. It should have been on the adjacent parcel ID. Both parcels are owned by Thomas Wright, but it should have been listed on the other parcel. In 2016, that was corrected by the tax department. Adjustments were made, and adjustments were made for every year that the board was legally able to make adjustments. And I have the list of adjustments here. There have been a total of 15 total adjustments made for Mr. Wright for tax years 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 17, 17, 15, 14, 18, and 16. So there's been a total of 15 total adjustments for Mr. Wright. $135 have been made since 2018. There's a total of $958.28 since 2013. And these adjustments were land value assessment fee corrected, land value lowered, personal property building error, overpayment of taxes, released mobile home space from lot. And that's what the refunds refer to.
Any more questions from Mr. Miller?
And if Mr. Wright has questions for me, I'll be happy to answer those questions.
Mr. Wright?
Yeah, I would like to ask you about 8627. That's the lot, why you said mobile home or something. Now, you haven't paid me anything. You haven't made no adjustment on 8627. You haven't made none.
We having trouble understanding you, Mr. Wright.
86, what's 86?
On 8627, you haven't made no adjustment on that. And I've been charged from 2004 to 2016 for it. The adjustment you made.
On April 10th of 2019, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 adjustments made. Of those 5 adjustments were all released mobile home space from lot.
How much money was that?
Pardon?
How much money was that?
I'm sorry.
That you gave me some money back for that?
How much money that so the mobile home space is listed on the property ID card at $3,100 per space. That's the way it was listed 2012 during this time when Mr. Wright, not the mobile home itself, but the mobile home space was listed at $3,100. So that incurred a refund and it varies because the tax rate evidently changed during these tax years, but anywhere from $23.12 to $21.05 per year.
How much have you refunded me back on that property?
Pardon?
On 8627, how much have you refunded me back on 8627?
I can get the total right quick. This is honest. $135.
What date was that?
4/10/2019.
I didn't get that.
Well, I have the refunds that were issued by the tax department, and they each say, added 4/10/2019, last changed 4/10/2019, sent to finance 4/10/2019. So they were sent to finance by the tax department to issue a refund, and by all means, if I can get anything wrong here, you got it.
Was there a check cut for that?
Honestly, I can't tell you if there was a check cut. I can tell you the documentation from the tax office says it was sent to the finance department, for refund.
I got 2 checks in, what was sent to the finance department, and I cashed it. I don't get no check for 8626.
So are you, just for the record, are you appealing a current year value or assessment?
I'm appealing the current year, and I'm appealing those years back. See, where you getting 5 years from? If he put it on now, and it was a mistake.
So that's what state statute will allow us to go back, is the current year plus 5 year arrears.
If it put it on now, but see, you charging me for a mobile home that didn't exist, and that's what I'm appealing now. He put it in the foster plan. He took it from 8627 and put it in the foster plan in 2016. So it's still there. And it didn't exist. It don't exist in the foster plan. You got a 1990 mobile home in my foster plan, and it don't exist. It never have existed, but it's been on 8627 with my house for all the years. Now you're saying you can't give me the 5 years back?
Commissioner, I don't.
I got the paper here, do you want to see it?
I don't know anything about a mobile home
You
being
got the paper here, don't you want to see it? You don't know nothing about the mobile home.
in a forestry plan. I know that there's 5 mobile homes on
See it here, right here.
0026.
See it here, right here. You want to see it? That's the one where it's right here.
Mr. Wright, this is from 2005.
I know it's from 2005. I can't see the mobile home right there.
I do,
Do you see parcel number right there?
I do, but we can only,
That's what I'm talking about, is that now. That's it, you're transferred over here on 8626. What's the problem with you?
Mr. Wright, we
You
can,
take that right down, that's where I got it from, down, I ain't ready to get the same thing I got.
okay, so when was this written? This is 0026. This is property year 2018. I show one home site with utilities. That's illegible. A one home site with no utilities, and 3 home sites with utilities. Open on paved road, wooded on paved road, use value wood, wooded on paved road, use value wood. And there's a note that says 4SW, 4 land, 4 fifth mobile home is land and forestry program. Land line number 4, not in land use due to junk mobile homes and old vehicles on this acres. Single wide across from 668, no well or septic system. Deleted 3 mobile home spaces due to corrected number of home sites. Spaces are now home sites, 5 home sites and all 1 undeveloped. So, I understand how this can be, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, Tom. But There's not a mobile home on this sheet. I mean, it shows a picture of a mobile home.
That's it right there, what you just read about.
Yeah, but there's-
The jumbo home, that be it, because it was moved from 8627 and put there. It's the same one, 1990.
But that's a note. That's not an actual charge. Your charge is,
How you gonna move something when it don't exist? It won't down at 8627. How you gonna put it over on 8626 in the wood, and it don't never exist?
Mr. Wright, there's no mobile home listed here in the back.
Not on the 8626. Then it come up on 8627, that same one was on 8627. That 1990, my home was on 8627, moved it to 26.
Yes,
I got that.
and there is the mobile home on 8627 that belongs to Essie Goodman.
That ain't that. You just said it.
The Essie Goodman mobile home?
Yeah.
Yes.
On 8627?
No, on 86,
8626.
that's correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You had it on 8626 and 8627
Okay.
at the same time.
So commissioners, what I can tell you is from what I saw, I compared every line to what I actually saw on the property. I don't see anything. I don't see it.
I tell you a good way to solve it. I can get a count for to go through this, but you gonna pay for it. If they find anything that 8627 was on this lot all these years and never existed, you gonna pay for that account. Cause you don't want to look, now you trying to say you can't see it. You don't want to believe what I said?
No, I fully acknowledge that the mobile home was listed from 2004 until 2016 on 26. Now, if that's where it was listed in 2016, that was corrected. And it was moved to 27. But during 2004 through 2016, it was not listed on 27, nor was it listed in the personal property effects for Mr. Wright or Essie Goodman. And here again, we can only go back to 2016, current tax year plus 5 in arrears. So 2016, it was corrected. Refunds were given, correct?
Yes, sir.
Refunds were given for current plus 5. That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying.
You said you didn't see it on 8627 from 2004 to 2016.
I did not see a mobile home listed on the same parcel ID as your stick-built physical home.
You didn't see it because it never was right.
And I agree with that.
Well, I'm gonna show you why I'm paying for it. You see see right on it. This is 2009. That's 10. That's 9. There it is right there. See it right there? See here?
And can I see it?
Yeah.
So this is for tax year 2010,
Tell me what possible.
parcel number 0027, which we cannot make adjustments to at this point in time because it's past current plus 5. There is a single-wide mobile home listed on parcel number 0027. At that point in time in 2010, that mobile home resided on parcel number 0026, right?
They're on both of them at the same time.
And I haven't found that. I have not found that it was listed on both of them at the same time.
You haven't found that it was on 8626 and 8627 at the same time?
No,
Well, you see it here on 8627.
yes.
That's what my house. Now, if I show you paperwork as on 8626 in 2009, will you sit in and you see?
On 2010, yes.
2010, I'm talking about from 2004.
That says in 2010.
These are here, this is, that one, 2016.
Mr. Wright, this says 2010.
Look at all the papers that, take this in from 10.
Mr. Wright, I have the same stack of papers.
Well, you got things that paper you throw to have, that's what I know.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentlemen, yes, sir. Mr. Cole.
other than making sure this last check we talked about, having our county manager make sure that the tax department did cut that check.
We don't really finance.
I meant finance, I'm sorry, I meant finance. Other than that, I see no need for any action from this board on this issue.
Well, I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get our accountant to bring me some paperwork in here, and you can pay for it. Because you ain't gonna believe what I said. I done figured this out. I know where I live and I know what I got. So, Mr. Miller done been over there, and Mr. Bernard done been over there. And he knows it ain't now been there. And I was charged for it. Now you saying that you ain't gonna give me none of my money back for the year that you charged me, and it started off when you started to work down on the tax office in 1997. You charged me for that mobile home sitting on that lot from 1997 to 2016. And I got all the paperwork from out of your office.
Mr. Wright,
Yeah.
is there any more questions for Mr. Wright?
I was supposed to not get, I heard you, man said about a check, and Mr. Wright said he didn't get the check, and we got somewhere we can prove that, those checks coming back.
Yeah, I can research that and try to determine whether or not Mr. Wright received the check.
Yes, that's what I asked him to do, to make sure that check was cut by the finance department, and if it wasn't, to get it straight.
Well, I think we need to table this until we get this straight, and then finish it up.
Well, that check was due from action we took in 2016.
Still don't have a problem.
This issue now
Is it right?
it's not doing the,
How can you say it's irrelevant when the man charged me for a mobile home on my property up until I come here and appeal? And he took it off then, but he won't die. It never existed. He was charging me for 6 mobile homes on this property, and he won't for 5. And how can you say it's not irrelevant when he wasn't there? And it would be something of an if the man didn't see it, but he been out there. I done been here and told you about it. And he's still saying, still 6, because he got one in the foster plan. Now, I can't have 5 mobile homes, 5 home sites, and 1 in the woods, in the foster plan, unless it's 6. He's saying they ain't charging me for it. Why would he charge me for it? Because it don't exist. But it's in the plan. It's in the foster plan. I don't know what effect, how effect you take on the foster plan.
Any more questions? Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is County Attorney here. My having some video problems, but I just want to reiterate to you that the taxpayer has the burden to prove to the Board of Equalization and Review that the property has incorrectly been assessed, either because its value and the true value in money of the property is assessed is not accurate, or there's been some other mistake that leads to an error in the property tax listing. So again, the presumption is that the tax assessor has it correct on the tax card, and the appellant, in this case, Mr. Wright, has to prove to you that That is incorrect. And so that's the burden that you have to look at this evening and decide whether or not that case has been made. If not, I would, if it has, you need to decide what the value should be. If he has not met the burden, then I recommend that you deny the appeal. And the tax assessor will then issue a formal determination from this board.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion, we deny the appeal.
I'll second the motion. Any more discussion? We'll do roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson.
Aye.
Mr. Hall.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Well, I have to vote, but I can't vote for it because I was trying to see the check.
Mr. Howard.
Aye.
Mr. Ostrowski. Aye. Mr. Messenger.
Aye.
Ms. Bay. Aye. Motion carries. Next. Mr. Howard.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, do we need to close the Board of Appeals?
No, I think it was ever open. We never wrote it on. We didn't have.
No, you were in an evidentiary hearing. You were in the hearing. You have actually adjourned already for the year. You are just dispensing with this evidentiary hearing as part of the wrapping up of your work as the board. So you've actually already adjourned. This was just the conclusion of the last hearing that you had on the docket.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howard.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners, I have three things I want to bring up for either discussion or just for the benefit of the board. First thing is that a month or two ago, we talked about problems we're having with some of the precincts in the Board of Elections. Specifically, in my district, over the years, citizens have been denied the use of bathrooms. I don't think we resolved that. I know we have requested a meeting with the Board of Elections and that didn't happen. But I think we need to go back and resolve this, even if precincts have to be moved. And if the Board of Elections don't want to meet with us, then we need to send them a letter and say what should happen, at least in our opinion.
Okay.
Just to comment on that, because I thought this board put money in that budget for facilities for this.
It's my understanding that facilities will be offered at each polling site. That was my understanding from our budget conversation. So I'll check into it first thing tomorrow morning.
So to this point, we don't know if anything has happened.
I do not know if portable facilities have been moved to the precinct, but I can find that out immediately following this meeting.
You said you don't know of what, Kelly?
Portable facilities, porta johns, porta toilet,
Okay.
whatever.
That's an additional cost. If they've got bathrooms in there, why not let the citizens use them? Or we want to add more cost? That's my thought.
There is one restroom in our district. In that, you're talking about in Castle Fire Station, I guess.
Yes,
Yeah, there is a restroom in there.
right.
Yeah. I don't see why they can't use it.
And
I ain't cheating, but I don't see why they can't use it.
second thing is about maybe a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, we talked about revising the job description of the economic development. And I don't think we've done anything on that.
No, there ain't been anything to do on that.
Well, I think we need to move on these things when we talk about
Okay.
it. And the third thing, after we had the joint meeting with the town of Nanciville and the town of Milton, and I got a magazine at home I was reading, the issue of branding was an article I read. And I think that the county and the two municipalities together should get together and do some branding for the whole county. We know, for example, that hunting is a big factor in California. We know that turkey hunting is a big factor. We need to get the word out there to those people in the surrounding counties that may not know, and that would be part of a branding plan. And I think we need to get somebody on that. There are other things that occur here in Castle County, and we need to let people know. Start our branding. We just can't sit here like the field of dreams, build it and they'll come. We got to let people know what we got here. So I think we should immediately start. And if we don't want to do it with the municipality, let the county do it. But we should start working on a branding plan.
Do you want to have a special meeting on these subjects?
I wouldn't mind. If we all can kick out some good ideas, and we can talk about how to go about it. I don't even know how we go about it. I just think it's a good idea.
Mr. Hall, would this not be a good item to include in the economic developer's job description?
Sure.
If we would have the economic developer take the lead on this, it would fit very well, especially with her previous focus on infrastructure. Branding is almost part of infrastructure, I think, from my perspective.
We've got the Chamber of Commerce here. Get their input. And maybe some other organizations will.
I agree. The tourism board is working along the same line. They just developed or are in the process of coming up with the driving tour brochure. So it's all part and parcel of the whole thing. And branding is an essential part of that. I agree with you 100%.
Mr. Madison.
I had a discussion with the Chamber of Commerce director just the other day, and this actually came up. And I think between the tourism board, the Chamber of Commerce, and somewhat economic development, that could be easily done by the first two with input from the Economic Development Board. No need for just one person to do it, because now you would have three different means of success.
Would y'all like to set up a meeting with these folks? If so, what's your pleasure on a date? Do you want to get it done before the end of the month?
Why couldn't we ask the county manager or one of the assistant county managers to talk to these two or three people and see if there's actually really a need for us to meet, or can they take that bull by the horns and go with it before we set up a meeting?
Mr. County Manager?
I'm happy to meet with all the groups mentioned today and report back to the board on, current branding efforts.
That's satisfactory, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I would suggest as you talk with them, if they're agreeable to what Commissioner Vernon is suggesting. Try to get an idea of a time frame. No? I guess I wouldn't be comfortable saying, well, we'll do that next year. You know? Even if we don't get it finished, we need to get started.
Okay. Yes, sir. Anything else?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the only comment I have on that is the economic developer is the only person that is part of local government, if you will. And that's why I envision that that person can take the lead, not necessarily do all the work, but take the lead on this project. So if you can kind of focus it that way.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's nothing else, we're gonna move on to action items, Nurses Week proclamation. Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, you have a proclamation for Nurses Week, North Carolina Nurses Week, whereas there are 120,000 dedicated registered nurses in North Carolina, and whereas registered nurses meet the emerging healthcare needs of North Carolinians and serve as an indispensable component in the safety and quality of patient care, and whereas our families, communities, and individuals depend on registered nurses and other critical healthcare workers to provide quality care, often in our most vulnerable moments in life. And whereas throughout the pandemic, demand for registered nurses has grown, and so many have stepped up to serve during this national health crisis. And whereas North Carolina's registered nurses have been on the front lines of the pandemic from day one, working and making daily sacrifices to save lives and care for people in hospitals, long-term care facilities, and other essential care settings. And whereas nurses have been essential in the massive effort to administer vaccines to every eligible North Carolinian, and have worked around the clock to get shots in millions of arms. And whereas now more than ever, registered nurses deserve North Carolina's deepest gratitude for their tireless commitment to our health, wellness, and care. And whereas the state of North Carolina joins in celebrating Nurses Week and commends the more than 4 million nurses who protect and promote the health of their communities nationwide. We, therefore, the Castle County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim May 6th through 12th, 2021 as North Carolina Nurses Week in North Carolina, and commended to its observance to all citizens. Let's paraphrase a little bit at the last part of the proclamation to remove the state connotation to a county connotation.
Any questions? What's your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve occupation nurse.
Second. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll do individual voting. Mr. Dickerson? Mr. Howell? Mr. Jeffrey? Mr. Owen? Mr. Odestriker? Mr. Massengill? Ms. Bay, aye. Motion carries. Law Enforcement Week proclamation. Mr. Miller.
National Police Week, National Law Enforcement Week. To recognize National Law Enforcement Week 2022 and to honor and service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Castle County Sheriff's Office. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifices and have been killed in the line of duty, including one member of the Castle County Sheriff's Office. Whereas the names of those dedicated public service are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas 619 new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring, including 472 officers killed in 2021 and 147 officers killed in previous years. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund 34th Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2022. Whereas the Candlelight Vigil is part of National Law Enforcement Week, which will be observed this year, May 11th through 17th. Whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Therefore, it be resolved by the Castle County local government will observe May 11th through 17th, 2022 as National Law Enforcement Week in Castle County, and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in the communities across the nation.
Any questions? What's your pleasure?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any more discussion? If not, roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson?
Aye.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Owens? Mr. Oates? Aye. Mr. Messenger?
Aye.
Mr. Vaz? Aye. Motion carries. Emergency Services Week proclamation.
Castle County Local Government Emergency Medical Services Week proclamation. Whereas emergency medical services are vital to the public, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, responding to hundreds of thousands of emergency calls in North Carolina every year. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas in North Carolina, emergency medical services system consists of 40,000 emergency medical dispatchers, first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, educators, administrators, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, and others. And whereas the members of emergency medical service teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas in North Carolina, the state of North Carolina recognizes the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical service providers, encourage the residents across our state to join in thanking our brave first responders for their ongoing work to keep us all safe. Now, therefore, we, the Castle County Board of Commissioners, do hereby proclaim May 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as Emergency Medical Services Week in Castle County, North Carolina, and commend its observance to all citizens.
I move that we approve this proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson?
Aye.
Mr. Howell?
Aye.
Jeffries? Aye. Mr. Owens? Mr. Oates? Aye. Mr. Messenger?
Aye.
Mr. Vaz? Aye. Motion carries. Project Day, project orders. Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, as you'll remember, most of you will remember, a while back, there was an economic development project, Project Day, that was authorized by the Castle County Board of Commissioners. There were economic development incentives approved. There was a reuse grant through the NC Department of Commerce and a 1NC grant approved. This ordinance that you have in front of you today simply authorizes payment to to the recipients of the Project Day Award, Riverside Furniture. The ordinance allows us to pay them the money that was approved previously.
Any questions?
Now, it was the match money that we were required for match.
Yeah, that's correct. So just to be clear, $250,000, the reuse grant through the North Carolina Department of Commerce, that's a reimbursable grant, so we pay it, we get it back. So there's no county tax dollars to be there. Same thing with the 1NC grant. The actual county economic development incentives that were approved were the match for the reuse grant and the match for the 1NC grant to total $62,500.
Any questions? What's your pleasure?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no more discussion, roll call voting. Mr. Dixon? Mr. Hall? Mr. Jefferson? Mr. Owen? Mr. Ostrowski? Mr. Gill? Mr. Banks? Motion carries. County manager's update.
Commissioners, I have 3 quick updates for you. At the last meeting, we spoke a little bit about broadband. I wanted the board to know that I do have a meeting with Spectrum tomorrow at 10:30. The meeting is with both their government liaisons and with their operational people, the people who have boots on the ground can tell us what issues they're experiencing, so on and so forth. So I look forward to that meeting tomorrow at 10:30. I did want to let the board know that we do expect to start receiving the opioid settlement payments in 2022. There's one payment scheduled for the spring and another payment scheduled, I believe, for the summer of 2022. So in all likelihood, we'll receive 2 payments, one in the spring, one in the summer. And probably the most exciting news that I have to share with you tonight is we have a new livestock agent in Castle County. I'd like to welcome, her name is Bailey Perkins. She recently joined Cooperative Extension. She visited with staff some today. She's a recent graduate. So I would like to welcome her aboard to Castle County Cooperative Extension. And wish her well in her future endeavors.
Give her a name again.
Bailey Perkins.
Thank you.
Commissioner comments?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Dixon.
There's another issue that needs to be addressed by the board that's fallen between the cracks, and that is the toughening of the ordinance for the out-of-county people dumping in their compactors.
So that's correct. I have forwarded all the information to the district attorney's office. I'm waiting to hear back from the district attorney's office on how he plans to proceed. The last communication that I had with the DA was that he would have his staff review and get back in touch with me. To date, I've heard nothing. I'm happy to reach back out to Mr. Rankin tomorrow.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
I've got 2 or 3 things. The Hydro Planning Board, has he been able to make any progress on that from the last meeting?
From my understanding, I spoke to Mr. Hoagland one day last week, and his indication to me at that point in time, what was that, Wednesday? Spoke to him Wednesday, he was about 60% through, so we're fairly confident we'll be able to have it for you at your next meeting.
Okay, and I think the meeting, 2 meetings ago, I believe Mr. Ostriker asked and Mr. Owens asked about the school.
That's correct.
security and where we stand with the money?
So right now, we're looking at an estimated contingency balance of $207,282, which is roughly 20% of our contingency balance. The balance of, okay, so we're looking at about 200,000 or about 20% of our contingency balance left with the project, like right there at being complete.
And is Mr. Powell gonna come to the board and?
Yes,
at
he
some
sent,
time?
yes, he sent his most recent update today. So that's what I'm reading for. And I would imagine he may appear on your next agenda to give you an update.
Great.
I just have to clear the date with him to make sure that works.
Okay. I know they canceled the school board meeting. Are we gonna readdress that?
The last communication I had from the Board of Education, was yes, they plan to try to reschedule that meeting. And to address, I think Mr. Ostriker's concern about the fence. The campus is currently, completely closed. So the fencing is in place. There's not one, I don't believe there's going to be fencing around, the exterior of the campus, but, you cannot gain entry, except maybe through extraordinary means, from anywhere into where the students are.
So that would indicate the metal detectors and other devices are working at the entry point?
I can't tell you about metal detectors. You asked about gates and fences, and I can tell you.
I asked about security.
The gates and fences are there. I'm not so sure about metal detectors. I think that's a great question for the Board of Education when you have a meeting with them.
My last, and I'll shut up. Are we going to, have budget work sessions?
Yes, we are, and we expect those to commence fairly soon. We're still waiting on a couple budgets from a couple departments. Some of those departments are rather large departments, so we've held off. But I have been in contact with those department heads, expect those budgets to go in front of those boards this week. They may have to schedule an additional meeting day to review nothing but budgets. But they've assured me that they believe that will be done, and we'll have what we need by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
Mr. Comment?
Yes, part of that security debate over the schools is lacking a key element. We need to be talking about cameras in the classrooms in the high school. When I toured it, was a great lack of that. That could be such a tool to be used, whether it's prosecution of criminal crimes or crimes that take place, or whether it's the school resource officer being able to sit in that room with all those monitors and see things happening before they get out of hand and being able to respond, and not having them in the classroom is a tragedy.
Here again, I think that's a great conversation piece for the Board of Education.
It'll be had.
Pardon?
It'll be had.
Okay.
Any more comments?
One more I forgot, Mr. Chairman, from the past, courthouse security. And I'm gonna say this the way I felt 2 or 3 weeks ago. Special privileges for special people. I walked in, and I know I brought this to the board's attention, and I saw a person bypass the metal detector. And I asked the officer there, why? And the officer said, well, I was told. that certain people could just walk on in? Why am I not one of the certain people? And when you let me take my cell phone in, we have the Register of Deeds, the tax office, and the IT office in that building. And oftentimes I need access to my cell phone when I'm in there doing this, but I can't take it in. The other thing is I've noticed that employees, certain employees go in the back door and the side door. Don't go through security. Now, I'm an employee of this county. So what? Again, we're talking special privileges for special people, and I think we need to change that. One of the things that could be done, if there's a major problem, is move the metal detector upstairs to the courtroom. And then people downstairs taking care of county business or whatever can go on in without being hassled or harassed. I think we need to address that.
Mr. Miller, I would like you to look into that.
Yes, sir.
Any more comments?
Yes,
All right, Mr. Kemp.
I invited Mr. Miller and the clerk down to my church, you know, I'm still not heard. Mr. Miller, you want to kind of explain some of what we saw down there? But we definitely need some.
Yes, I'm happy to explain, Commissioner Jeffries. I had the wonderful opportunity to tour Mr. Jeffries' church and get a good indication about how sound systems can work. I'm happy to inform the board, they have a wonderful sound system that I think would work incredibly well here. We're in the process of reaching out to give me just a minute. Ernell Bellamy, he was the architect of their sound system. Their sound system had multiple points where they could play the same or different music. There were multiple points where you could adjust the sound in every location. I think it could be a real asset to the courthouse, especially with the problems we have with our sound. So it is something we're currently exploring. When I have a quote and a price and some type of list of components, I'll bring it back to the board for your consideration. But it was really a fantastic. Well, first of all, it was a fantastic facility, number one. I was very impressed with the whole facility and especially the sound system. It was really nice.
Any more comments?
I have one more question. This $284,000, that's in the school budget, that's gonna be a
Say that one more.
Talking about the contingency fund. Brian didn't understand the question.
So the contingency money that's left over, I don't think necessarily reverts into the school budget. I don't think that happens. It's part of the money that we would borrow through our final piece of financing that we still have to go through. So I don't think it goes back to the school. I think it's really your decision, this board's decision on what happens with that.
Any more comments?
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. July the 1st, Caswell County will have their second annual fireworks show here. pretty big success last year. And the same gentleman is, footing the bill for the fireworks show.
We sure appreciate it. Any more comments?
Commissioners, before we move into closed session or announcements and events, if it pleases the board, I'd like to add a closed session for personnel, 143-318-11A6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer, employee, or prospective public officer or employee. If it pleases the board, I would really like to add that to our closed session items.
Anybody have any problems with that? If not, I'll do announcements and upcoming events. Boyd Gansey High School graduation Saturday, June 11th, 2022. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to go into closed session for item 143-318, period 11, parentheses A, parentheses 5, to establish or instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or the amount of compensation and other material terms of an employment contract or proposed employment contract, as well as item 143-318, period 11, parentheses A, parentheses 6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any more discussion? If not, roll call voting. Mr. Dixon? Aye. Mr. Howell? Aye. Mr. Jeffries? Aye. Mr. Owens? Aye. Mr. Ostrander? Aye. Mr. Massengill? Aye. Ms. Bay? Aye. Motion carries. We now sit in closed session. Now sit back in open session. And at this time, I will entertain, I'm sorry, Mr. Howard.
Just another comment. Now, we talked earlier, I forgot which one of the items about having a special meeting. Maybe after Brian talked to somebody. One of the things that we can do, and I'm sure that Brian will have lots of comments to make, and the rest of the board will have lots of comments to make on the grant. One of the things I think we could do is all of us individually try to get more people, more citizens involved in some of these decision makers. So if, say, after we have a meeting or we talk about it, and we all agree that there are 7 of them, that we'll get 2 people out of our community to serve on a committee, an ad hoc committee, to say, let's talk about it. Because if we can do that, the more people we get involved, the less negative comments we're gonna get. Now, a lot of the negative comments are just loud comments. They're not the majority. But if we get our friends and neighbors to join in and make some recommendations, there'll be less negative comments, I believe.
Anybody else? Now, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Roll call voting. Mr. Dixon? Aye. Howell? Aye. Mr. Jeffries? Aye. Mr. Ostrander? Aye. Mr. Owens? Aye. Mr. Massengill? Aye. McVeigh? Aye. We're now adjourned.